So much like Citizen Kane, Casablanca is one of those classic films that, all film buffs and historians place at the top of their you have to see this lists. Casablanca is arguably the more entertaining of the two films, but I'll let you be the judge of that. While Please silence phones during the movie. While Citizen Kane was a fictionalized portrait of a real-life figure, William Randolph Hearst, Casablanca is a fictionalized portrait of a world at war. The story takes place in the early days of World War II in the city of Casablanca, Morocco. Rick, played by Humphrey Bogart, a former freedom fighter, runs a cafe in the city that attracts both German and French officials and refugees trying to escape the neutral United States. At the beginning of the film, Rick comes into the possession of stolen and highly coveted letters of transit that would allow the persons carrying them free to escape from Germany-controlled Europe. It is not soon after that Rick's former lover, Ilse Lund, played by Ingrid Bergman, arrives at the cafe. With her husband, Victor Laszlo, a well-known Czech resistance leader played by Paul Henry. They're looking to escape to America so Laszlo can continue his work for the resistance, and they soon learn of the letters of transit Rick is holding. Unfortunately for them, now far more cynical than he was in his youth, Rick refuses to sell the letters because of the bitter way Ilse ended their romance years ago. And so the film revolves around Rick's struggle to follow his heart or to do what's right as local authorities press down on our three leads. Casablanca was based off an unproduced play titled Everybody Comes to Rick's by high school teacher and playwright Murray Burnett, which he wrote after he and his wife took a summer vacation through Europe in 1938. They were in Vienna shortly after the Germans took over Austria and noticed a great deal of anti-Semitism there. While in the south of France, they visited a nightclub with various amounts of clientele, from refugees to those in exile, and an African-American piano player who would become the real-life inspiration for the character of Sam. And thus the entire club became the real-life inspiration for Rick's Cafe, the primary setting of the film. Irene Lee, head of story department of Warner Brothers, discovered the play on a trip to New York. The play was brought to the studio the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and Warner's paid an unprecedented $20,000 for the rights to it. The screenwriting duo of Philip and Julius Epstein were hired to pen the script for the film, but had to leave halfway through the writing process to work on a television series called Why We Fight. Howard Koch was hired to continue the work on the script, but the Epsteins returned to work on Casablanca about only a month later. 3 different writers working on one script might sound like a mess for a film, but that is not the case for Casablanca. While the Epstein strengths lied in the melodrama and comedy, there's a lot of dry quibbing in this thing. Koch is responsible for spiffing up the romance between Rick and Ilse. This combination of unique writing styles helped to make the film the success it is today. The song As Time Goes By is a major part of the film's music and overall theme, but at the time the song was not very popular. The filmmakers were considering replacing it with a different song during production, but to do that would have cost the studio a lot in reshoots, especially considering Ingrid Bergman had already gone on to film a different picture and cut her hair for it. And what are you going to do, put a bad wig on her? And the song is integrated into the score, the dialogue, etc. And ultimately the song worked, and As Time Goes By is now considered a classic. Because the film was made during World War II, most of it was filmed indoors on sound stages for security reasons. In fact, a Japanese submarine was spotted off the coast of California during production. So there were no on-location shoots, no car chases, no nighttime shoots, and in fact, the final scene at the airport was filmed on a small stage where the airplane was just a cardboard cutout, and to give the illusion that the plane was full-sized, little people were used as extra for the plane crew. Because it was wartime, they didn't have the luxury of using materials such as rubber and aluminum, which were common in movie making, and the budget for costumes was greatly affected as well. But I think the greatest effect the war had on the film was the actual casting of the characters. Half of the film's secondary and minor roles were played by real-life war refugees. The scene in the bar where half the bar is singing the German song Watch the Rhine and the other half is singing the national anthem of France, those are real tears in the eyes of the extras. Peter Lorre, who plays Ugarte, fled Germany after Hitler came to power. Paul Henry, who plays Victor, was Austrian. Ingrid Bergman, who plays Ilse, was from Sweden. And Humphrey Bogart was from New York. The film made Bogart a huge star, and Bergman, who already was a major star from the film work she did in her native Sweden, became a huge star in America as well. Fun fact, Bogart was actually shorter than Ingrid Bergman and had to stand on an apple box during a lot of his scenes with her. sort of the reverse of what Natalie Portman had to do while filming the first two Thor films with Chris Hemsworth. Casablanca premiered on November 26, 1942, in the midst of World War II, and the actual city of Casablanca was invaded just as the film came out. Despite its high-profile cast and crew, no one expected this film to have much success, seeing it as just one of the 50 films a year Warner Brothers was churning out at the time. The film had its release pushed up to take advantage of the media's attention on the Allies' recent invasion of North Africa. Casablanca made over $4 million at the domestic box office and would go on to be nominated for 8 Academy Awards and winning 3, Best Picture, Director, and Screenplay. The American Film Institute listed it as number 2 out of their 100 greatest films of all time in 1998. And it was brought down to number 3 in the 2007 ranking. For those keeping score, Citizen Kane is number 1, It's a Wonderful Life is number 20, Jaws is number 56, Goodfellas is number 92, and all the other films we've seen here aren't on the list. I think it's time for another re-ranking. A sequel was planned by Warner Brothers titled Brazzaville, but the project was quickly killed when Ingrid Bergman became unavailable. A sequel in the form of a novel written by Michael Walsh titled As Time Goes By, see what he did there, was published in 1990. The Marx Brothers produced a satire of the film called A Night in Casablanca. Warner Brothers would produce 2 TV series based on the film, both in 1956 and 1981, and both did not work out. The biggest success the studio had in recapturing the magic of Casablanca came in 1995 with the Looney Tunes short Carrot Blanca that acted as both a parody and homage to the film, with Bugs Bunny as Rick, Daffy Duck as Sam, Sylvester as Laszlo, and Penelope as Ilsa. This film has been parodied by the likes of The Simpsons, Saturday Night Live, Modern Family, and The Fairly Odd Parents, and so many of its classic lines, some of the most memorable film quotes of all time, have been repeated dozens of times throughout film and television, like "Here's looking at you, kid," "We'll always have Paris," and "This could be the start of a beautiful friendship." So what made Casablanca such a success? Well, it was in my opinion, it was a major product of the times both in front of and behind the camera, a film about World War II with a production greatly affected by World War II. To see resistance fighters like Rick, Ilsa, and Victor win over the Germans in the film acted as sort of an inspiration to the public, I think, as the world was still caught up in the war. It gave people a shot of patriotism. It gave them hope that victory and freedom was achievable. At the time, so many people's lives, like the ones playwright Murray Burnett first came across on his European vacation, were torn asunder because of the war. People like Victor and Ilsa were actually stranded across the world, and it gave them hope that life could be pleasant again. And much like the song As Time Goes By conveys, the film has a great sense of nostalgia for both love lost and old, and better times of yesterday. But it is through the efforts of individuals like Rick, Ilsa, and Victor that the quality of life can improve both in and out of wartime. A great script, wonderful performances, and a timeless message. These are the key ingredients that can make and still make Casablanca and many other films a timeless classic. As the song says, the fundamental things apply as time goes by.